Welcome, everybody, to Sally Speaks podcast. I am your mentor and guide along the way, really helping you to embrace what is your best qualities. This podcast is designed to inspire, motivate, and allow you to create the life of your dreams. And I have the pleasure of having the most amazing people join me that are leaders in their field. And today I have Danna Beal. And Danna resides in Seattle, Washington. And she and I met probably a couple of months ago and automatically clicked. We are both very connected on the work that we do, but also on the vision that we have for the future. And so Danna, I'm going to tell you a little bit about her first. She is an author of the book, The Illuminated Workplace, and it is now available on audio as well, from what I understand, which is fabulous. But if you haven't read it, it's about shining light on the workplace culture. And so both of us were having a number of conversations over the last few times that we've met about the workplace culture. And in this, she reveals the path for rebuilding the relationships and ending the fear, pain, and suffering in the workplace. And if any of you have worked in larger workplaces like I have, you will have witnessed a lot of that along your journey. And over the 30 some odd years that I was in corporate, I definitely saw a lot of that in the workplace. And so Danna, being an international speaker, retreat leader, she's also a writer with many compelling and critically important messages for healing the workplace culture. And her work brings forth the qualities of universal love that, compassion, which I think is really needs to be understood in the workplace, and respect for one another that are so badly needed in today's workplace and also in the world. She's spoken on many stages, over 500 conferences, workshops, speaking, and for organizations, including a few of them I'll mention right now: the Federal Aviation Administration in Seattle, the AHRA in Orlando, and a number of locations for them, the Swedish Science Foundation, the Orthopedic Spine Surgeons in Seattle, Washington, Grand Rounds Kaiser Permanente in Oakland, and the Conference Board in New York City. That's just a small few, because I've seen her bio and I've seen all the different people that she's spoken to. So today we are really going to dive into shining light on workplace culture. And there's no better woman to do that than Danna. So welcome. Thank you very much for joining me today. This is going to be so exciting.
Thank you, Sally. That was a very nice introduction. And you're right. You and I just seemed to click from the first time we connected. And we've never really met in person, but with Zoom, it feels like we have.
Absolutely. And that's, I like that about our common workplaces that we have, that we're working from our homes.
Yes.
Because it does allow you to relax and to be able to understand and take the time away from all those distractions that are typically around in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really interested in finding out, what do you feel is the overall purpose of what you're doing for the workplace today? And what's the message that you want to get across to people that are in those workplaces?
Thank you for asking that, because that's the core of what I do. It's about rebuilding relationships in the workplace, rebuilding them, because they need to be rebuilt, especially after COVID. But it's about honoring the spirit in ourselves and others that's residing beneath all these self-created identities that battle and compete for power. And I believe when we can do that, we can each align with our authentic self instead of our ego self that's out there competing. And when we do that, we can replace fear with trust and compassion. And I know we're both on the same page about that, but it's easier said than done. Yes. It's in the heat of the moment, and it's in the real world that we have the opportunity to do that. Mm-hmm. So that's what I've been doing for 23 years. Oh, exactly. Wow. That I wrote my first book, and started addressing the issues in the workplace.
Mm-hmm. So now, what actually made you get into this field of study that you're actually now working with people on? Because I'm sure you had some background in the workplace that you identified some opportunities, but tell us a little bit about that journey.
Well, it's kind of, I think most people in the audience have probably had this feeling as you look back every step in your life seem to unfold exactly as it should, rather than the plan that you had for it. And that's what happened to me. And I kept having doors open into new industries in one way or another. And I was a consultant or an employee as a marketing director and a speaker. And I did a wide variety of training and working with people. But what I noticed most of all is that so many people were suffering in the workplace. And the companies want to make more profits, but they don't understand that oftentimes that the underlying turmoil is blocking and preventing them from achieving the level of success they would like to achieve. And oftentimes those in the top are unaware, or they choose to ignore that there's a lot of contention and gossip, pain, worry, people that are feeling victimized. There are bullies, and it can go on under the surface, but it really affects productivity and ultimately customer service and the bottom line. So I just listened to all these different people describe to me what was going on for them. And then to be really just direct, I woke up on January 21st in 2000 in the middle of the night with just a clear picture of what was causing this conflict and how much it needed to be healed. And I started my work and I wrote my book, and I got such great response from people, because people don't want to be in conflict. They want to go to work and have fun and enjoy their work and connect with each other. And I know you teach all the same things I do. And people are really responsive to that. People want to feel good and feel satisfied about their work.
Yeah, they do. And I think, having come from corporate about 3 years ago, almost 4 now, really seeing all of those elements that you're talking about, that fear of, whether I was going to be good enough, or who was going to, take over the meeting or demand things of me that I didn't want to do, or the bullying, etc. And like you said, it's that ego that really gets in the way with a lot of people as they're trying to climb that corporate ladder, because they want to be the one climbing a lot of the times. Leaders are wanting to do that kind of thing, versus actually aligning with your team and creating a better atmosphere to move forward together, because that's where the real power is. And so I love what you were saying about, we have so much of this, I don't know, dis-ease, I would call it in a way within the workplace. And when you actually do gel with a team, and that team is working together and you all appreciate each other, I've also had the opportunity to work in that kind of environment, and it was just so blissful. It was so easy. It was joyful. You were happy to come together. And you also didn't mind putting in extra hours if you needed to support that team. So tell me a little bit about how you help to shift that within a workplace.
Okay, that's a good question, because the real shift occurs first in each one of us. So my work is about a personal restoration plan, so that each one of us can connect with our soul, our innate nature, because that part of us, in each of us, really knows what to do. That's the part we can trust. That's the part that's connected to something so much bigger than the individual. And it's the egos that feel separate and feel like they have to struggle and fight and get their light, their moment of light in the, the sunshine. and they don't understand so often that it's already in them. And that when we discover it in ourselves, we can emanate that to others. I even call it love shine. If the sun has sunshine, our hearts have love shine, and we can feel it. And just like the opposite, if you walk into a room and there's a lot of negativity, you can feel it.
Yes.
And when you are operating like you described with a team that's in alignment, you have endless enthusiasm and inspiration. And it's not fake. It's teamwork. And I call that group will. We each have an individual will, and you have a lot of will. And I know that many of your friends do, to reach their dreams and put away their fears and move forward. But when you combine all our wills, it's exponential.
Mhm.
The sum is greater than the parts.
Yeah.
So if leaders understood that, and more are coming to it. I read
Mhm.
articles every day. I'm sure you do too, about the trends and what the leaders are recommending that they do and the managers do to create a better culture.
Mhm.
And they're recognizing they have to have a better culture because nowadays with Glassdoor and other websites, people can find out about the culture before they even interview. Things have kind of switched roles. The employers need to compete to get the best employees.
Yes.
And it used to be the other way around. People were seeking the best jobs and trying so hard to get them. And now, maybe partly from COVID, having that pause, people are saying, I value my life and I want balance. So I'm going to decide where I want to work and how I want to work and those kinds of things.
I think
And not everyone can be an entrepreneur. You've done great, and a lot of people have, but many of us just have to stay in the workplace and learn to maybe be part of this shift.
And I think, a lot of the generational shift is having a different expectation than their parents and grandparents did on what they were willing to give up for work.
That's right.
And understanding that they have options now. And, even the digital entrepreneurs that are traveling the world, living in the tropics and enjoying their lifestyle, but working for a corporation back home. There's so much of that happening right now. And I love that because it really does allow you to enjoy your life on your terms, but yet still have a healthy income and a contribution back to that company or to society. So I really love how it's starting to shift as far as the expectations of, my work does not have to be like 90% of my day consuming day, and that those deadlines and those kinds of things, or else my job will be at risk, versus I have this opportunity to be able to create the lifestyle and choose where I want to work and who I want to work for. And it is a competitive market out there because of the aging population and the new generations coming in. I've seen a big shift in how they work, right? And I think that's also a big part of the culture, is for the senior people in the organization to understand, not criticize, but understand where the other younger generations are coming in with a different perspective. So have you ever worked with that in the workplace? I'm just curious.
With the different generations? Yes, because now I'm speaking to audiences and most of them are younger. And I think they have their values in the right place.
Yes.
Oftentimes they're criticized, but they actually are saying that they aren't thinking like our parents went to work, stayed with the job for 30 years or 25 and retired and really didn't live their lives fully. And the younger generation has discovered that there's more to life than being at a workplace. 3/4 of every day, waking hours, I should say, in a workplace, and coming home exhausted. I actually have called it an invisible prison, and that it varies to some degree, but many people that do leave their particular workplace where they feel that way and find a new job describe it as freedom, getting out of prison, having the freedom to work the way they want to work. So not in many of the companies that I work for, especially healthcare, they have to be on site. They're service providers. And so they can't have all the freedom that someone who's working from home or remotely or hybrid, but they can create a workplace where they work as teams and enjoy going to work. So one of the things that I hope we would talk about is how the conflict gets going and how it perpetuates drama.
Okay, perfect. I'd love to hear that.
Yes. Well, as I said, the first step is to get to know yourself deeply. Introspection. In fact, emotional intelligence, that's one of the key components, is to know yourself and then understand others. But the second part of that is, how do you lead? You want to lead with trust and build trust in your workplace, and compassion, and authenticity and humility. And those kind of qualities require you to be operating from your authentic self. When we see the conflicts that are reactions and counter reactions and reactions and counter reactions, they are escalating to the point that everybody's miserable. And then the people that aren't exactly in the conflict, they're fearful too. So the question is, how do you unravel that? And again, it starts with you, each one of us. And when there's a conflict, the first thing we need to do is recognize what in me is being triggered. Instead of blaming that other person, we need to look at ourselves. Why am I getting so hooked into this? And if we can pause and take a deep breath before we immediately jump in out of a knee-jerk reaction, we can pause, we will discover that we're covering up some kind of fear in ourselves, some kind of doubt that we don't want to expose. And it takes great courage to face your own ego.
Yes.
In fact, most people don't. I would say the majority of people never get below the ego level because it's too fearful. And
it opens them up to vulnerability, right?
Yes, vulnerable. And when you're vulnerable, people can discover your weaknesses and your fears and your shame, the things that you don't want people to know about you. In other words, your shadow.
Yes.
But if you're evolved and you're willing to look at it yourself, there's nothing to hide. You don't have to keep blocking attacks or perceived attacks. They aren't even usually attacks on you, the individual. It's usually, well, what the other person is saying about you is really about them. And your reaction to them is really about your own fears and doubts. So that's the secret, whether it's individuals within a group or even spouses or family members.
Yes.
Instead of immediately blaming, discover what's inside you. I like, Sally, you talk in some of your work about the star and storylines, and so do I. And so what I want people to realize is everybody has a script. Yes. And they don't know your script and you don't know their script, but we jump to judgment and think we do. So does this make sense to you?
Yes,
can you see?
Yeah,
it's the mirrors. Instead of blaming, look in the mirror and discover that what you are trying to protect or claim is just a mask. And I think that one by one, as we take our masks down, we can see our fellow souls, our fellow journeyers. And that's when we can respect and bring forth love, when we see ourselves in others, when we can walk in their shoes and they can walk in ours, instead of perpetuating drama. Have you ever seen that going on, that perpetuating drama in your workplaces?
I sure have. And in families as well, there's a lot of perpetuating drama in certain family circumstances. And I think there's, it's almost, I would say it's a protection mechanism that we're trying to protect ourselves by pushing that energy or that negativity to others to make them feel uncomfortable, because that's how I protect myself from having to deal with myself.
Exactly. This, you're putting it in different words, but describing it well. The very same thing. And it's what everybody's doing. And sadly, it can cause whole wars between nations.
Yes.
And that need to have power over and be superior. But that's why I love what women are doing. I think it's the time of the female.
Yes.
And yes, and we're leading in the pathway of compassion and wanting to bring love in the world. I use the word love. I call it the Be Love model of leadership, because who we are, who we're being is more important even than what we do. Because if we're being authentic, then the steps that we follow and the plans that we make will achieve far more than we could coming from the ego.
Yes. So now how does someone break down that ego? What do they need to do to get to that be loved space as opposed to the ego? Because
Yes.
there's a lot of ego in business. There's a lot of ego in family structures.
Yes.
And friend structures. So what would
Yes.
you say is the best method that you've been able to employ for that?
Well, again, our greatest enemy is not somebody else, it's ourselves. And being willing to look at ourselves, and sometimes just in exercises of practicing self-forgiveness and self-acceptance. And I mean, we're often afraid to even look at ourselves, even when we're alone. We even hide from ourselves, the shadow part of ourselves. And the more we can understand that, the freer we are to do everything we need to do, because we're not looking at external validation. We're starting to come from within, the love in us, because love is the most powerful force. It sustains all life. Yeah. And I say this to my live audiences in all my writings. We all need love. No matter how macho you might think you are, or how powerful you think you are, you're really wanting and seeking love. And we need validation. We need to be appreciated. And when we find it in ourselves first, then we can offer it to others. And so that's this is all part of what I call the personal restoration plan, so that you can become a leader that operates from love. We're restoring ourselves to our true selves, our true identities.
That's beautiful.
The soul in us. In fact, I even teach people to say, I am, for example, I'll use my own name. I am soul operating in the body of Danna. But I'm far more than the role that I play. I'm far more than my history. I am a soul on a journey. And when I recognize that in myself, I can see it in others. And I'm calmer. I'm more loving. I'm more compassionate. I'm stronger. Because I'm not hindered by worrying what everyone else is thinking. And when you find yourself really fearful or worrying, look at that and see what is it. And most of the time it's what other people think or what other people are going to do. And so we want to be able to come from a loving heart, and that's what we'll get back. Rather than impress people. I know people that are working so hard to impress others that they make a terrible impression.
Good observation. It is true, right? Because it does come across completely differently when you're coming from the heart and making that impression, as opposed to coming from the ego. Again, ego work comes back in and driving toward that success, like you want to push everybody else away, as opposed to gathering others and bringing them forward with you, which I think is a big piece of that. The other thing that I've noticed is, in doing a lot of work with my clients and with myself, is that when I react to a situation in a certain way, and it doesn't feel like it's just an automatic reaction, it allows me to then stop afterwards and say, where is this coming from? Is this just something that I've trained myself on for years? Or is this really coming from a heart-centered approach? Is it just a behavior that I've developed over the years? And so that to me is a big piece of that insight, to be able to really identify, where am I coming from and why am I reacting a certain way to a feeling that I've had in the past, that I continue to operate that same energy. And so it's bringing that awareness, I believe, to how it is that you react to situations that may have stemmed back to childhood. Most of them do. And someone telling you didn't get a high enough grade, so you got to get a better grade or you're not going to be worthy. And so when you don't get a good grade, you react. And you shelter your fear, all of those types of things. So do you have a specific way of getting people back to understanding how to work within those paradigms and how to be able to really start to operate from the love and understanding?
Yes, and what you just described is exactly what happens. And the fact that you have the insights and the courage to look at, where is this coming from? Some of our behavior is just conditioned behavior. We learned it, and it's not necessarily right. In fact, many of our thoughts and behaviors are very limiting, and they feel authentic and they feel real because we've been doing them for so long. So breaking out of those patterns is difficult, but where it shows up the most is where you have the most emotion. In fact, I think right now we are going through a huge shift in consciousness on the whole planet, but it is also happening individually. And to get back in alignment is requiring you to recognize this game that I see going on, and it goes on both sides. And it's one side is blame and the other side is self-righteousness. But they're actually the same thing, because the person who is feeling self-righteous victim is saying, I am good and you are bad. And the other person that's blaming is saying, you are bad and I am good. So really, it's a mutual dynamic. Both people feel they're being a victim. And both people are projecting it fully onto the other person. So to be able to come into alignment with your own soul is to see it in yourself and disengage. If you can do it in the moment, that's even better. But if you can't and you can do it later, that's still, it's bringing awareness to the behavior and discovering its source. And is it coming from love or is it coming from fear? Really that simple, but not easy to do.
And oftentimes it's, it's the repetition of recognizing it over and over. Because it is an automatic response. It's an automatic behavior that you've developed for years. And so being able to really identify it, first of all, and then to realize when you're actually in the moment of it, oh, shoot. Maybe I could have changed that or said that differently. But to that recognition and the opportunity to now say, how would I feel if I was on the other end? Or how should I react differently? Because that's not truly who I am.
Exactly.
Right. It's what we've been programmed with. And now we need to get back to who we truly are at our deeper soul level. Like about. And I think that is where the beauty starts to just automatically happen for us. We're coming from that soul place and not from the head space.
That's another good way to put it, because the ego is in the mind, in the head, and the ego and the mind, or the thinking part, wants to control everything. It's when you give up control, when you start trusting and be in the present moment. We didn't talk about that yet, but being present is the pathway. It's dwelling in what happened before, whether you're whatever happened, or worrying about what's coming up in the future, means you are not in the present. And the presence is where all power is. And in the present, we can invite things into our life that we would never expect could happen. And I have had it happen again and again, and people call it synchronicity, even miracles. Well, I believe we are connecting with the universe that is also responding to us. We're co-creating when we do that. But it takes great trust. It takes the trust to jump off the side of the mountain. It takes trust to give up the reins and stop thinking you're going to fix everything the way you want it to be, and it's going to turn out that way, because the way it turns out may be, and often is, far better than your original plans. And I'm not saying you don't plan. Of course you do. But you need to be open and not be so fixed in what is going to unfold next, because nobody knows.
Oh, and Nicole, also, I know there's phrases out there, going with the flow, but being in the flow of the energy that's around you, and being appreciative of the things, the little things. So if you're going out for a walk today and the sun is shining and the flowers are starting to bloom, or you're seeing something grow, or butterflies, like just little appreciations like that, get you grounded back to where you need to be, so that you're coming from your center, as opposed from, the mind that's so busy all the time trying to keep us on a different frequency. And so I really find that when I'm in those moments, it is magical things that appear to happen. And opportunities that just make me giggle or laugh, or just say, oh my gosh, did this really happen? Because that's when you truly know, in my opinion, that's when you truly know that you are in that beautiful space of that flow in your body and in your mind, and that ease that you invite
Yes.
in, because you've stepped away from the ego, you've stepped away from all of the noise, and now you're actually in that zone of just beauty and appreciation,
Beauty.
gratitude and love. And
Yes.
the things that show up for you is just incredible when you
Incredible.
actually get into that space. And that's what you're talking about. The universe provides
Yes.
as soon as we end up in that space. And even if it's for a few minutes in the day, once you've experienced it, a few minutes in a day, you kind of want to figure out how you can do it
Yes.
again and again, right?
Yes,
And,
exactly.
in the workplace, that can be huge, to be able to pull yourself back into joy really quickly, or gratitude,
Yes.
and to be able to really make a difference to the rest of the team. And
Right.
just the spirit of you showing up that way
Right.
can brighten the whole room.
You so get it, Sally. You so get it. And that's why you're doing so well in your life, and you're helping share this message. It's so needed. And I'm sure people that are listening know what we're talking about, that calmness that comes over you when you're out in nature and present, or even music can do it. I ask audiences, how do you get de-stress and get reconnected and aligned? And I mean, they say everything from fishing, just that solitude, or with somebody quietly fishing, or going for walks, or walking, and even in the rain sometimes can be so refreshing and just brings you present, and it realigns you with what matters. Because at the end of our lives, we are not going to be sitting there trying to think of all the great things we accomplished. We're going to think about the love moments and the people that loved us. And that's when you have a life well lived. So let's live it now that way.
Exactly. Let's make the most of it while we've got the time.
Yes.
So tell me about the personal restoration plan that you have.
Well, I actually have a workbook, and it's what I use with leaders to help them through the steps that you and I are just discussing. And it helps people identify, number one, what has been their starring role, what's worked for them in their life, but also what have been the costs. Because the starring role, if it's an automatic starring role that you believe you have to star in, it also has some costs. And in my workshops, or even people individually reading about this, can recognize that perhaps they were doing a lot because they didn't want to disappoint their dad, who might already not even be living anymore. But there's some inner voice to follow what dad said or mom said, or some people have sacrificed their whole lives in one career only to realize it wasn't what they wanted to do. I had a group of CEOs, one of those CEO groups where they're all CEOs talking to each other. And one of them was the CEO of a big company with, multitude of employees. And he said, thank God I've made enough money so I can afford the psychiatrist who can help me figure out why my dad was so hard on me. And so, made everybody laugh, but he was describing the truth. He was striving for his dad. Now he can afford to find out why. And when we can, in a way, forgive our parents for doing maybe not always the perfect thing, but doing the best they could do at that, with what they knew, with what their background is. And so that's the personal restoration plan, is various steps like that. Facing the enemy, which is really looking behind your own mask, and what the steps to take to really bring forth all your full authentic power, so that you aren't held back with we already have the power. It's already in us, but we have these barriers that are beliefs. That as we recognize them, we find freedom.
Absolutely. No, I know I do. As you know, we both do similar work, but I don't work as much in the workplace as you do, but it's definitely something that I know I can work with. But at the same time, I appreciate everything that you do for the workplace, because it can be so toxic in certain environments. And it's one of the most difficult places where we spend most of our time.
Right.
And so, if you
Exactly.
think about our working week, we spend a lot of time either commuting back and forth to work, thinking
Yes.
about work. We spend our day at work all day doing what we're doing, or all night if
Right.
we're working night shifts and things like that. So it can be a really interesting environment when you're not aligned with the people that you're working with, or the goal of the organization and what's being asked of you.
Mhm,
So the
mhm.
work that you do is just so important today. And I
Thank you.
really do know you're making such a big difference to so many people with
Thank
what you're offering. And I really appreciate you for that, because
Oh,
it
thank you.
was probably a big step 20 years ago to step into that type of
Yes.
work in the
Mhm.
workplace, especially.
Yes.
Let alone in the
It-
individual space. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And it was a big step, but it's been what I've been dedicated to,
Mhm.
and it overrides and I follow that path to health wherever it shows up, and it shows up in, then at my age, I'm no longer wanting to work as hard. So my attitude is I do what shows up, and it just keeps showing up. So there's still a need. And
There's absolutely
yeah,
probably a
in
bigger
fact,
need
more than
today.
ever, more than ever.
I believe so too. So now when it comes to customer relations, because we're talked a lot about the employees, what about the customer relations as it applies to the workplace? Because we've talked about the employees, but there's a lot of employees that are touching other people.
Right.
So what do you do with your work along that type of line?
Well, what's important for leaders to know is that your customers are often the window to your organization, and your customer service, I mean. And when the customers, whoever they're interacting with, whether it's on the phone or at the front desk, or nowadays there's so many ways, email and all the different portals, interact with your customers, and the customer can be patients, it can be other vendors, it can be members. It's every industry calls them different things: customers, clients. I've worked in every industry, and that's one of the experiences I realized was it didn't matter what your service or product was, whether you were private or a government or a publicly held company. People interacting with people, that's the relationships, that's everything. Nothing else really matters if you don't have the relationships. So it starts at the top and goes down through the organization and extends to the customer, the patient, the client. And people that are frustrated at work, they will not provide good service because they can't. They don't have the the sense of loyalty. I hear people have many times tell me they expect me to do what they don't do within the organization. They give us all this customer service training, say this, do that, but it's not authentic. So I often work with people that are frontline, and especially in healthcare has been a pretty big niche for me. And most people want to do a good job and they care about other people, but if they're stressed out or overloaded or feeling, oppressed by their employer, it's really hard to extend good customer service. So it goes back to be love model, starts at the top, the foundation, and goes down through the organization and to the customers. And frontline people, when I talk to them, sometimes they're in this job just as a starter job, or, say they are a restaurant worker, they're, working in a bigger organization but they're at the lower tier. How you work in that place, that wherever you are, it's also going to determine where you go next. So no matter who you are working, we're all equal human souls. We have designated titles and roles in an organization. It's an artificial culture of its own. But how you give and what you give from your authentic place will impact where you go next. If you can't survive in this job, you will probably find the same thing in the next one unless you do the personal work yourself. And then you'll attract a different kind of company. So wherever we are, whether we're, at the top or the bottom, the in-between, the organizational chart really does not define our roles or our leadership or our value. Those are just structures, artificial structures, really.
Mhm.
So I've said a lot about that subject already, so I don't know if that answered what you were asking me, but it's all connected.
Yeah, it definitely is all connected. And I think regardless of your position, your title, it's all about reconnecting yourself to what, like you were saying, the authentic self, your true spirit, the true love that's within you, and how you
Yes.
can best show up every day, all day. And,
Yeah.
you know, give yourself some grace if you fall off the, you know, off that path
Yes.
in a meeting or a conversation, because we can all do that.
Right.
There's no such thing as perfection, I'm sure, but there's an opportunity for us to be able to self-correct, apologize if we need to, and say, oh, I'm sorry, I reacted that way, and just be able to move forward and to
Right.
clear the air right away. Because I think
Right.
oftentimes that air is left so heavy after conversations or meetings or interactions that we do carry even more energy the next day to that same person or that same
That's right.
situation. That we just really need to understand that as humans, we have the opportunity to actually just clear it.
Yes.
And move on and bring back that joy, bring back that teamwork, bring back that appreciation of each other and what we all offer to be able to really create that success.
Right. And you said it, grace. I call it compassionate grace. And to give it to yourself and to offer it to other people, because we all make mistakes. And in fact, the best workplaces, they allow for mistakes. They create a safe environment, because if you don't allow for mistakes, I've talked to many people that realize that they've created a fearful environment, leaders, and that actually ultimately prevents them from new innovation, because they're always looking over their shoulder. They don't want to make a mistake. So having grace and trust and providing a safe environment to experiment. And then something you just said about clearing the air, if something does build up, a truly authentic person, a good leader, is willing to say, I'm sorry, or I made a mistake. I don't have all the answers. In fact, I want feedback. And I know we've all met the kind of leader that just wants to be told that everything they do is right and that they have to be right. And that's not authentic power. And it doesn't work.
Yeah, it's that authenticity. I know it really does make a difference. And it's coming from the heart. In my opinion, it's all coming from the heart, which is why I love that you put the word love into your work, because in the workplace, it's always been kind of like, I don't even mention that word, right? But I don't know if you've encountered this or not, but there's a lot of corporations where there's been downsizing and, you know, people losing their positions for no reason other than the companies decided that they don't want those positions again. So have you coached in that environment or helped people to understand how to heal from that?
Yes, that's a really good question. That's really a good question, because it's happening here in Seattle with some of the high tech companies. And so overall, there's been a great resignation, but certain industries are cutting back. And what I really want people that maybe have been either fired or let go or you know, whatever, that your worth is not your job. You are not your job. That was a role that you played. And maybe in the long run, you'll look back and that was the best time in your life when this happened. And so as individual souls, it gives us more confidence to know that we make the choices of where we're going to go next. And I don't know about you, but I look back in my own life, and where I had the biggest growth was always after something that was painful and caught my attention or woke me up. And often it hurt, and it took some grieving, and it took some resorting out. Sometimes just a simple act of redoing your resume, if you've been laid off, can really empower you again, to remind you who you are, because you sometimes feel lost in the workplace and you start feeling diminished. And so I recommend regaining your strength through aligning with what you already know. You have unlimited potential.
Yes.
Maybe you want to go back and take some more classes. Maybe you want to, maybe you just want to be in a whole different industry. Those that are willing to, dig deep and go forward with what they know is true about themselves will find amazing new opportunities. I look back in my own life and I see some of the biggest things that happened to me, some of the shocking ones, were not really the ones I planned. I mean, shocking in a good way.
Yeah.
They just showed up. On my path of doing this, then I get a call from somewhere else that's even more amazing than anything I would have, tried to do on my own or thought I could do. In fact, if you would have told me 25 years ago that this is what I would be doing, I would have been amazed.
Exactly.
The things that I've done that I didn't know I had capability to do.
And I think, with anybody that's, subjected to the great resignation or the downsizing or whatever you might want to call it, it's just opening up that next opportunity for you.
Yes.
So if you look at it with different eyes and say, well, the company just got rid of 300 people or 20 people, or maybe only 2 of us. There's a reason why. Maybe I wasn't meant to be there any longer because there's something greater waiting for me.
Yes.
Typically, it's always greater that's on the other side. I've
Yes.
had many times where I've either chosen to leave a corporation or that there have been some other moves. And it's like, you know what? I always came out stronger and better. And the next opportunity was even more exciting.
Yes.
And so things happen to us for a reason. And sometimes it's just a season.
Yes.
But they definitely happen to us for a reason so that we can step into that next level of growth and experience more of what we're put on this earth to do. So I know I've experienced that, and I have a lot of friends that have, some of them that have had a real struggle with having been downsized later in their careers and that kind of thing, but it was blanket across the company. It wasn't that individual. They just chose a certain level of individual or a certain income level and just said, okay, no, we're good.
Yeah.
Right. And so it wasn't really a personal attack, but yet we sometimes feel that way.
Yes. We not sometimes, we almost always
Always
feel that way until we can finally move on and see that it really was a good thing that happened.
Yeah.
But at the time, if anyone that's listening to this right now, if you're going through something like that, you can have the feeling of being deflated. And so I just want to remind, just like you're saying, there are many opportunities and options. And when you get your strength back by spending some time in nature, being present, looking at your resume, looking around at different options, maybe just taking some time off first before you do that. Have a sabbatical if you can afford to do that. And reconnect and realign. I call it unification with the soul.
Yes.
And
great verbiage that you pulled together for everything.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's just what comes to me. And I honestly feel I was inspired to do this work. It's more than what I would have done on my own. And I didn't just write my book. It was like a stream of consciousness that came to me in the night, every night, and I would handwrite it. And in the morning, I would put it into my computer, and then all of a sudden I had enough information to write a whole book, and I did, and I've continued to do that, and it seems to resonate with people. So it's needed.
Yeah, you were chosen. That's awesome.
Well, and I chose.
Yes, you did.
And you chose, and we all choose, and we create. We are here to create.
Exactly. Well, I wanted to thank you so much today. This has just been absolutely wonderful. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm sure our audience will as well. And how can people find you or your books or book you for an event?
Thank you for asking that. The book, again, is The Illuminated Workplace, Shining Light on Workplace Culture, and you can find it on Amazon, of course. And I also have a website, and it's www.Danna Beal, and Danna has 2 N's. And so it's DANNABEAL.com. And I have some resources on there that are free and more information about the work I do. And I do speaking engagements. I do private coaching, both leadership coaching and people that just maybe want to talk about one issue. You know, they don't want to have a contract with me or anything. They just want to, they're having an issue with, for example, the boss from hell, and they don't know how to deal with that. The Gallup poll says that's the number one reason people leave their job is their direct supervisor. So I help people with that. So I'm happy to share anything I can that might help others.
Perfect. Well, I will definitely put those links in the YouTube video that we put out and on the podcast so everybody can
Great.
find you. So if
Great.
it did resonate with you today, which I'm sure it did, please reach out to Danna. She's a beautiful soul. And as you can tell, she comes from her heart in everything that she does. And it's just been an absolute pleasure to get to talk to you today. And I just feel so honored. So thank you for joining me today, Danna.
Thank you. I feel honored.
Oh, you're so sweet. Okay, we'll see you all next week.